Welcome to the Bike Shed podcast, where we talk about all things software engineering, the AI stock market bubble, and my new Breville espresso machine. I'm your co-host, the acquirer of keyboards, Scott K, and alongside with me are my co-hosts, the machine, the myth, the legend Matt GBT, now with 10% more sass, Matt Hamlin, and my other co-host, with takes so spicy, the language gets a little dicey, Dylan Spicy Take Curry. Fellas, what are we cooking up today?
Another great intro, Scott. Today we're going to cover a few things, but our main segment we want to focus in on this sort of Remix 3 demo that maybe some of us have seen all the way through, maybe some of us haven't. I would say to the listener, if you're interested in Remix or React, like maybe pause the episode, go watch it, and then come back. But make sure you actually come back. Like, don't leave yet. But yeah, and then I think we want to talk a little bit about that, and then we have some sort of side segments we want to dig into. Scott has some spicy takes on handling different like null or undefined values in the UI, so that'll be interesting for us to dig into as well. So on the topic of Remix 3, so for people that aren't in the web the web ecosystem, the other week was pretty busy. There was like VeeConf announced a lot of stuff, like Veet Plus, things like that. We're not talking about that today. That would be interesting to talk about maybe next episode. There was a React Conf, which sort of snuck in there also somehow, that most people didn't actually tune into, I think. And then there was also a Remix.
This is my first time. I didn't even know there was a React Conf. Which is crazy.
It is crazy. I think in past years it was like, I feel like it was more topical, but I don't know. Yeah, this year just like right over me. I don't know. I think it caught a lot of us by surprise, maybe. But yeah, the third conference that happened, I think last week was Remix Jam, which was this, I guess, event in Toronto at the Shopify offices, I think, where Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson, the Remix guys, as we've referred to them in the past on this podcast, showcased. I think there were some other Remix related talks, but the main sort of center stage was all about this Remix 3 stuff that they've been cooking for the past couple months, maybe a year or so.
I remember him saying, like, we've been working super hard for 3 months. It's weird to see people again. I don't know. That's what he was acting like.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting sort of following them. I mean, a couple episodes ago, we might have to dig it up, but we talked a little bit about I think I primarily slandered these guys saying like, what are they doing? They're wasting their time. They're talking about like going back to, old web development stuff and like throwing out React and things like that. And I think I was giving them a hard time. I think after watching the demo, I think I've changed my mind, and I think maybe React has an end in sight potentially, which is maybe a hot take, and maybe we talk a little bit about that. But I guess like just to set the stage, like Ryan Florence is probably the best demo giver in web development. Like I can't think of anyone else that can get up on stage and showcase some code and just have you completely enthralled in like what is happening. So maybe that's why I'm like convinced, is that the demo is just actually pretty interesting and useful and insightful. But anyway, I've been monologuing too long. What are your guys' like initial thoughts on, like, you guys watch the videos or watch part of the videos? Like, what are your initial thoughts on the demo or what was showcased? And we can talk about the specifics a little bit after also.
I don't think the demo was like super well done in terms of like the presentation. Maybe that's a hot take, but the actual like work that went into building the demo ahead of time, you could tell there was a lot of like time spent on that to try to show the different concepts that were coming to Remix V3. I think he sort of like got to random parts in the presentation through chatting with Michael on the side. It was almost like he was the host, and Ryan Florence is like sort of just going through the demo at a random pace. But yeah, what about you, Scott? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, these guys really know how to get me excited about Remix. I don't want to be let down I think we talked about it. Matt brought this up in a couple of episodes ago. I don't know, it was like half a year ago. I really wanted to dig into Remix, and we talked about this, but then they kind of said like Remix is no more, and uh, we're just using like React router packages. I do like this approach that they're taking. They in the demo they showed everything from many just their own packages. Each thing was its own package, but the goal was that it would come all out of one main package when they were using it in full. They just wanted to showcase some of the pieces individually. Um, I thought that was really effective. I actually thought it was a great demo, like Matt said. Some of it there was some lulls, but yeah, Ryan really captures an audience. He really he talks a lot about some things that like he brought up like what a um, was it a click event actually does, all the things that happen when you do a click event, and how it's like very over saturated with like things it does, which was great. That kind of knowledge just made the demo more interesting to understand what they were building. And I think there's so many things Matt said that had me thinking, and I don't guess I don't know how I feel yet. I would like to see Remix maybe challenge React. I know there are other things out there like Svelte, and they're not used too widely yet. I guess I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I feel like because React is in so many code bases, because there's such a large network of folks who know it already, it's going to be hard to pull it away. And I'm not saying that React is the best solution. But I am really excited to see something else finally come out of this. I really want to use it. It's like last year, November of last year, when I was super stoked to like try to learn it. But then now they're like, we're going to rebuild the same thing, but forget React. We don't need this React. I guess I want to point out in my long-winded monologue as well. One thing that I thought was interesting was, so many times in React, I try to separate the state from the return of the JSX. Like I might have some state in there, but over time, as I'm building things, it's just as of recently, like especially, I have so many handlers there. I have so much stuff that has to happen, whether it's hooks or um, just events. It, it becomes unwieldy really easily, and what they were showing in this demo was exciting from that standpoint. All right, that's enough from me. I'm digging a little too deep.
Yeah, I guess like in terms of like structuring this conversation on it, I think like one, I think we should talk a little bit about like what was showcased for people that maybe they have watched it, but maybe it would be worthwhile refreshing it. And then also like maybe two, um, after we talk a little bit about that, maybe we talk a little bit about like once it is ready for maybe even an initial alpha release or a beta release, like what do we think that will look like for teams? Teams that maybe choose to migrate to it, or like what does this mean for React long term, or things like that. Yeah, so I guess like maybe digging into it a little bit. I think the way I've at least sort of distilled what Remix 3 is it's effectively two concepts. One is like event handling, or like event um, managing events. And when we talk about events, we're talking about like usually like DOM events, or like things like adding like add event listener, and having an event emitter sort of in your web application, right? So yeah, one of the things they demonstrated was, I think, an API that sounds like it might no longer be the case. I think I saw a tweet from Ryan like a week after the demo or something, saying like, oh, we're actually like removing this create interaction concept, and it's just going to be plain old event handlers, and like your event, like sort of your interaction becomes this thing that looks like a component, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so one of the core aspects I think they really focused on was like handling events or using events to manage state. The other aspect was on components, which they kind of talk about, but they basically like reduced a lot of maybe the complexity that a lot of people see when they see functional components in React. Like they didn't show any hooks. I think you could replicate something that looks like hooks, but it's not using like an internal dispatcher that React uses to manage hook state, for example. And so that's kind of interesting. Maybe we talk a little bit about like concept hooks, and like maybe how we've come from, what was it, 20 2018 when they introduced hooks or something. But yeah, so events was one core concept, and these components. And the components are slightly different, but they look kind of similar also to React components, just without hooks, I guess I'd say. So like that's maybe the light, sort of, I don't know, 30-second distillation of like what Remix 3 so far looks to be, is like this framework around those two concepts. I guess, am I missing anything with that rough summary? Or like where do we want to dig in there?
One thing I thought of when you said that is how like it's still changing. That's kind of something that scares me about this. Not it scares me. It like deflates my hype in a sense. Like, oh, that this looks really cool. The things that he's doing with this code looks cool, but it's gonna like it's not available yet. I can't really use it. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to use it for 6 months. And then the other thing, maybe we can get into this later, is this is vastly different from the way we write code at work. Um, if I want to use this at work in my projects, is it going to take me a year to migrate to it? Or is there going to be like an easy way that they're going to provide to do this migration? So that would be that maybe that's something I should like create an issue for, is like, hey, I really like this, but there's no way no way in hell I'm going to use it unless there's like an automated way to migrate my app to this.
Doubling down on your first point, Dylan, is yes, the stuff they showcased is like even pre alpha or something. Like they are publishing some packages under a jam version tag on npm, so you could technically try to go and build something with it. And in fact, I've seen some people with repos that like set up like a Vite based SPA using it, and they're a little bit clunky, a little bit weird. It's like not fully ready yet. So yeah, I think maybe that's a good thing we should sort of put a little asterisk on this episode, is like we're talking about an API that doesn't really exist yet. It's just like the concepts of an API. Maybe that'll help ground our discussion, or like ground the listener that are listening to us.
Yeah, especially like they've been working on it, like they said, really hard for 3 months. So like these guys are usually methodical and they don't release stuff forever. So the fact that they like had an epiphany of an idea here and they what they showed, I bet you the majority of what they showed stays the same. That these guys, unless they really think there's an even easier way. Some other things I noticed was like some of the, what was it, create one of their create
Interaction.
functions. There's create an interaction. There's create something with an E. I'm not remembering, but maybe it was create interaction. It looked a lot like React State. However, it wasn't state. I found that to be very interesting. You could pull like getters and setters out of it as an array, so that pattern felt familiar. To your point about migrating, one thing is like AI is great at migrating things. So I would imagine these guys would try to feed this into AI and how to make it migrate that fast. I know, Matt, you said to hold off on that, but I had that thought. I just really wanted to point it out there. That seems to be kind of the migrating path these days, and it also has context, and the context seemed pretty easy to use. And also, they were really adamant to talk about how the context doesn't force re-renders, and that this paradigm isn't a React paradigm. It doesn't consistently re-render. So it's going to be, I think the hardest thing for people maybe who only know React is how to live in this world where it's not about forcing renders, and how that paradigm has changed. That is a fundamentally huge shift in the way most people probably program these days.
They've been really harping on having this be like sort of AI first or like model driven, which my original reads of it from their blog post, from all their tweets and whatnot, it's like I was like, all right, but what does that mean? Like, like it's hard to see what they mean exactly, but it in many ways, like the 3 months that Ryan was like sitting in a cave hacking on this stuff, it's like I think he was basically just working with like Cursor or Claude Code the whole time just to try to build out the framework using AI also, which is interesting. How much benefit do you want to put it, or like stock of trust do you put into something that AI is generating for you for a framework versus for feature code. But anyway, yeah, I think Dylan, you have some like thoughts that I was going to also talk about, so I'll let you just share those.
No, we have some show notes that we have running, and I'm throwing some of like the main features that I remembered. I mean, one of you just mentioned the context feature. And then another thing in the presentation that it was using this again, which I feel like was kind of a shocking moment in a weird way because I feel like we've shied away from that in recent years with TypeScript and JavaScript. And another thing that's huge that I liked a lot was the explicit updating. I think Scott sort of touched on that. No more hidden re-renders. I think that's sort of going to be a hard learning curve for people that are so dependent on React in the way that it updates things, but it's going to force people to really understand what's going on. And then another one in the top of mind that I was about to post was who knew that this was like the first argument to a function in TypeScript? I still haven't like fully wrapped my head around that was like a feature built in. I thought that was so interesting. I don't know why. I don't even know that like it's gonna change my day to day that much, but I just was like, whoa, I didn't know that was a thing.
That to me also is like crazy, sort of mind blowing in a sense of like, I was like, what do you mean they're passing this like into the function? And I was like, it took me quite a bit of time to realize that this is just like that syntax is only a TypeScript feature. Like it's a way to type the value of this for that function, and it's not like when TypeScript compiles out that code, it's like you don't see an argument for your function called this. So it took me a while to like sort of understand what was going on and like what they're doing there. But it is a neat, maybe a slightly esoteric TypeScript feature. Obviously it's been so long since most web developers have had to use this that it's like a feature that TypeScript didn't really, like most people probably didn't even know that it's a TypeScript feature potentially, or maybe I'm just like living in a cave or under a rock to know about that. I do think just like thinking about how people might react to it. I think maybe like people, maybe 90% of people will really love the event abstractions that it's using, and then maybe 10% of people will like really love the component abstractions, and in terms of like manual updates and or using this to update and the context features and stuff like that. But I feel like the bulk of people are just going to enjoy the event part and not necessarily the component aspect part. But maybe I'm biased there. All right, we've hashed a little bit about the framework implementation, or framework side of things, APIs, stuff like that, and obviously it's some of it could change before we see it. I guess like maybe moving on to adoption, what this means for React. Maybe I think we probably said it, but like just to be clear, like Remix itself is not using React under the hood to handle diffing of the DOM or VDOM and things like that. It's using its own VDOM implementation that still supports JSX, so it looks a lot like React, but it doesn't have all the same features that React supports. So if you adopted view transition from React, for example, like that's not an abstraction that currently exists with Remix. Maybe they add something that looks like it, or suspense list, if that's even still a thing in React. So like those aren't concepts within Remix, at least at the moment. One of the other cool nuggets I saw, I guess before we dig into migrations, was basically the replacement for suspense that they called frames, or like it's a replacement for suspense / a replacement for server components and client component abstractions, which was like really neat. But I feel like they didn't spend that much time talking about how it works. Maybe that's just like the part of me that just wants to dig deeper into it. I don't know if you guys like remembered or like saw much about the frame implementation. That was sort of during the demo they showed, and this was like sort of later on in like sort of the back end part of the demo, I think. But they showed like a bookstore, and they showed like product cards of books, and each of those product cards was an individual, what they called a frame. So it was like a separate hydrated client component. So they'd server render the rest of the page, except for those frames, send it down, and then those frames would then hydrate on the client. Kind of like at least my assumption is like how like sort of server islands, server island architecture works with other frameworks. I don't know. That was pretty like exciting to see that the abstraction exists.
I missed that part of the demo. I'm sorry.
I think it was very obviously they spent a lot more time on the event stuff, I think, and then also more time on just like standard, like at least for the back end part of it, like more standard like back end server-y stuff than digging into the frame. So like it was, I think, kind of like a hidden nugget. I'm even now thinking about it, and it's like I kind of want to go back and rewatch the demo just to like understand it a little bit more and see what it looked like.
I just looked for like 10 minutes to find out what I was talking about. It was create event type. Create event type was the API I was looking at. All right, not important, but we're back at it. Sorry, man.
Were you listening to Matt? Kidding.
Yeah.
I was multitasking.
Any other little nuggets that you guys want to talk about, or before we dig into like what does this mean for React or like migration or future or whatever? Like, if not, yeah, maybe we talk a little bit about like, okay, you're working in a React code base that has thousands of components. What does it mean if you want to adopt Remix 3?
I have like a couple of questions before we get to that. So some of the stuff I didn't get to was like they were talking about async, as well as like Remix component library and bubbling custom events. Does anyone have any thoughts on those topics?
I thought on the component library, which is like, it's interesting to see a framework like this sort of ship its own component library, but it also makes sense in the sense that like, everyone else expects there to be a component library that exists for your web framework, whether it's some third-party library like ShadCN for React. I'm sure there's something equivalent for whatever other frameworks out there. So it kind of makes sense in a sense of like they need to bootstrap that for this framework. So that to me, like, it's like, okay, that like sort of like clicked in my mind of like, of course, like if they want to encourage people to adopt it, they need to share some abstractions for them. But otherwise, it was kind of interesting. I feel like the React team obviously wanted to shy away from shipping a lot of these baked-in features when they shipped React, like a custom router or other libraries. They just didn't see that as an aspect that the React team needed to manage. But I think that this sort of points to like the Remix guys have a different perspective on what should be baked in or what should be available out of the box provided by the first party versus third party solutions.
Yeah, I feel like they understand that moving to this, if you're currently in a React app with ShadCN, for instance, it's going to be super hard. So they're trying to make it easier for people via providing those tools. So that makes sense to me.
Another kind of aspect of that is like they've baked in a CSS and JS framework as part of Remix 3 as well. So this is in their JSX usage they showcased a few different like custom props or whatever. It's like on was a custom prop to add multiple event listeners to an element, but they also support a CSS prop, which my understanding is that they basically works kind of like almost every other framework's custom JSX CSS prop. So like you override the JSX factory that your bundler injects and it handles the CSS prop for you. So that was neat, but like it's not that uncommon, I guess, in the space. Scott, you were talking a little bit about what were the other ones you called up besides the component library?
Yeah, event bubbling was one, and async programming.
The event bubbling is like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like I feel like they were selling a feature that already exists, and they were saying like, look at this event, just like I can move a listener up to the forum, and it just works. And it's like you can do that in React. So like to me, that was like what's different, what's unique about this? Like I don't know. To me, it was just like okay, and versus like I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, or like maybe there's an aspect there that I missed when watching the video.
I didn't get to that part, but I was just wondering if there was any excitement there. I really do think it was maybe front loaded with excitement, showing off kind of the context and like it's clear it's not complete, right? The context might be there and like how custom events and the separation of events from the layout that looks really good, and that's like really the pro so far. The rest of it we'll see how it comes. Like again, these guys are methodical. I don't know how long it'll probably take them a while, but I do think if they approach this problem as like here's a bunch of little packages, and when we have enough done, we'll create a large package. They might be onto something with that approach. basically the Shad CN approach. Well, a little different, but similar.
Another thing that sort of worries me a little bit in the back of my head is that um, these guys have like known to release a change that has like a pretty dramatic API change, and then sort of go back on that in the next major release. So, which is not to say that it's like that you kind of need to again, like you need to FAFO a little bit to like land on the right API or right abstraction. And I think I don't know the exact versions. I should have looked it up, but I think like React Router, it's like the change from V2 to V3, which is like well, I say decades ago, but like years and years ago, was like a pretty dramatic shift, if I remember correctly, of like how you structure your routes, how you handle loading, stuff like that. And then they basically like there's maybe decent amount of outcry in the community, and I think they sort of like flipped back from V3 to V4 of like going back to a more model that looked similar to previous APIs. And so to me, this is like, and kind of not necessarily the same in terms of like API change, but just in terms of like naming change of like migrating from React Router to Remix, and then like rebranding Remix back to React Router last year or whatever it was. So like it gives me a little bit of a pause of like maybe I wait for Remix V4 or Remix V3.1 or something until it's like fully baked and they've like figured out these abstractions. Yeah, I don't know. It's again, we're talking about extremely early software here, extremely early patterns and concepts, and so like some of it's likely to change.
Yeah, we're all looking at this from the lens of like we've never really used Remix in production, and it would be cool if we did, if all these things came to light. It just feels like at this point, I feel like they just need to like rebrand V3 to like something completely different and just call it something completely different. Like just remove Remix from it because I feel like Remix is maybe that branding is maybe tainted at this point. Maybe that's a hot take.
I feel like they landed on a great name a couple years ago, and they're like, Remix is great. Like I feel like it's genuinely a good name, and so they just want to keep using it, but they just want to use it for their current latest project, not like old stuff. Like find a new name. Maybe that's a bad take on it, but yeah.
You're both right. Like it's an awesome name, and they never really made it, but like it is branding. I don't want to say it's branding 101, but like, have either of you guys watched The Wire? One of the best TV shows ever. I'm recommending it right now. Britt and I are watching it. Anyway,
Did that come out in 1990?
oh my God, it came out in 2002. Still one of the best shows ever.
Same thing.
All right. I don't want to derail us too far here. Well, it's on HBO now. Okay, but point is, like, one of the guys, he's like learning about selling things and whatnot, but like just rebranding something, and giving it a different name, and it could be the same product, even though in this case, obviously, it's not the exact same, can have a huge impact or effect. So it is a little tough from that standpoint. If people associate Remix with like feeling let down from the last couple iterations, it's gonna be a little harder. And I'm not trying to put points against it, but psychologically, if you felt let down by it, it might make that harder to everyone to move to React. Like a good example is React, right? Everyone got on it and it worked well to start, and now it's kind of the standard because of it. Just a side thought there.
I guess like zooming out a little bit, like I think the industry, well, I think the people the React developers in the industry are starting to realize that they've been React pilled for the past 10 years.
Hell yeah.
and and I think it's really interesting also to think back that like Ryan Florence was one of the demos and like speakers when they announced React hooks. And I feel like he was on stage selling them, and like people got bought in. They're like, what is this? This is crazy. But then actually like said, actually, this is pretty cool. And then so like hooks came out and people were like, it seems a little bit funky, but let's adopt it. And there were some people in the industry that were saying like, that's still really weird. Like, why come up with this thing? And then, a couple of years, zoom forward a couple of years later, and it's like suspense and server components, and people were like, oh, okay, that seems interesting. And there's like maybe a larger audience of that larger slice of the React ecosystem and saying like, wait a minute, this is weird. I think that's what we're starting to see is like we're starting to see that slice grow even larger to become a very either a vocal minority or get close to a majority of the React ecosystem, saying like, actually some of these concepts are kind of funky, and what if we didn't do it this way? Like, what if we did it a different way, right? So we've seen this with like, people moving from Next to TAN-stack Start, for example, which as I understand it, exposes a kind of a similar-ish API as the React Router framework mode or whatever it's called, Remix V2 or whatever it is. And so part of me is like, I think we're sort of like maybe catching a wave of like, actually, what if we didn't do it the React way, but we took the good parts of React and maybe like a simpler programming model or a simpler abstraction around how you load data, how you handle events and manage state. And like, I think that ultimately is my sort of like summary of like maybe what Remix 3 is trying to accomplish. From what I've seen so far, it looks pretty exciting, but again, yeah, some of it's going to change. Yeah, I feel like I was maybe summarizing that topic. I don't want to like cut you guys off on further thoughts there, but yeah, it is interesting. I think that like we've
Yeah,
sort of,
definitely.
I think we're starting to
That's a great
see
way to put
maybe
it.
not necessarily
I
a
think
downfall
we
of
like
React, but sort of we've hit
almost
the
like
peak,
everyone
the
uses
plateau of
React.
the
I don't
adoption
want to
curve
say
of
it's
React. I
silly
think.
not to, because there are good use cases not to, and there are good solutions. I haven't used Astro, but for static site, I've heard really good things about it. And I once touched um, Svelte. Shout out Artie for a project, but they seem like good solutions. It really just more so when you have all these corporations and their giant code bases on this one platform that everyone agreed on. I feel like getting unstuck from that is going to be kind of a challenge. But if something presents itself as strong enough, and with AI being a great migration tool, we might finally see a change, which is honestly exciting in the world of JavaScript and front end.
All right, can I do one critique of the presentation? Maybe a hot take. Another one. I had maybe a
Please.
couple at the beginning, but there was a moment where, and this I want to see how everyone feels about this. Maybe it was sarcasm, where he basically was like, "Oh, I just asked Cursor to build this part of it, and I put that off to the side, and I don't need to know what that's doing. It just works." Um, what were you guys feeling? Was that sarcasm, or is that just like, is that the way that we're moving in development?
That was kind of like what I was trying to get to also earlier. What I was saying, like, it seems a lot like he was using AI to build the abstractions in this framework so far, which is like, and yeah, maybe I'm taking this a little bit tangential of your question, Dylan, but like, gives me a little bit of a pause also of like, I don't have full confidence that AI generated code is like as good yet as human written code. And so part of me is a little bit hesitant of like, okay, like AI generated the code that handles the core abstraction for event handling within the framework, for example. And it's like, how trustworthy are we that that's like doing the right, making the right choices or whatnot?
Yeah. I meant more like it was the moment where he was like, "I generated that. I'm not gonna look at it. It spits out what I need." Um, I'm okay with people using AI and like closely reviewing it and iterating and iterating. It was just that maybe I'm like reading into it too much.
I think it was a joke only because like later in the presentation he made a comment about, well, first off, I hope it was a joke, but I think it might have been because later on he made a comment about how he put in the Claude MD file the exact thing he needed for a solution for a specific part of the demo. So he actually had it like generate a whole part of the drum machine, I think. Trying to remember what part it was, but maybe it was the whole update method he basically ended up making. But basically, he was like, "Yeah, I put the whole thing in the CloudMD file. That's how you know it does what you want it to do." He made a comment like that. So my assumption is, it seemed like they prepped a lot. So maybe he just said that, I don't know, to kind of like keep the thing exciting, make you think a little bit. But I, it's hard for me to believe that he wouldn't know what it's doing because like they broke down a lot of code and exactly what it did. And he kept talking about some really interesting things that what JavaScript does by default nature. I mean, with all his years in working on JavaScript, he knows a lot about some of these things. So my assumption is like he has to at some level know, but if they're just yeeting out solutions and not looking at it, I'd be really concerned because I'm 100% in agreement with what Matt said. Like AI can write really good code, but I may probably have said this here, but it's better at things that are more common. When you're building something that's more abstract, that's harder. When even though there's context bloat, if you give, we use Claude. There are Claude MD files everywhere. Like here, great example is you tell it not to use the any type and it uses the any type everywhere. So like there's things that it just like fails to do sometimes. Often I see it creating flags that can be used for multiple things, or they just add a lot of extra bloat that just doesn't need to be there. So I would imagine if he's serious about this, unless he was rushing just for demo, he knows what it's doing. Sorry, I'm being long-winded about this, but I'm very hopeful.
Yeah. I was less trying to like call him out and just make sure that hopefully the way that this industry moves is we don't normalize
100%.
like creating AI slop, don't review it, just like stick it in a file and then reference some function and it's sort of like encapsulated the AI slop. I just don't want that to be a thing that this industry becomes, and I'm afraid it kind of maybe is already on that path. But yeah, maybe that's another episode.
I agree with you on that.
Stop the slop.
Oh man, we got a campaign. We got to start doing that with our tech signs. We got to stop the slop.
Stop the slop.
I have one coworker, as maybe one of one at the company, who doesn't use AI at all. Maybe we should like bring him on the podcast. That'd be crazy.
We should. We're still waiting on Rogan. Shout out Rogan.
Well, to be fair, we're not waiting on him. He's waiting on us. But
Yeah, it's because we record the podcast at like 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern.
yeah,
So we'd have to wake up at
We're gonna have
5.
to like take off.
don't
We
don't
gotta
give
figure
away
that
all our
out.
secrets. But yeah,
We'll have to take off a Friday from work altogether.
I'm cutting this segment out. Sorry.
All good.
okay.
We record at 6 a.m. Eastern. We don't want him to be up till 3 p.m. 3 a.m. 3 a.m. Jesus.
All right. Yeah, I think we've talked a decent amount about Remix 3. I mean, again, it's still very early. Curious to hear everyone else's thoughts when you listen to the podcast. Let us know what we got wrong. How there was some kerfuffle on Twitter about another podcast that covered it that got a lot of things wrong. So hopefully we're not as bad as that. Yeah, I guess let's transition to we had a few side segments. First up, we want to cover a new segment that we're maybe tentatively calling, maybe we need to come up with a better name, is Scott's Style Corner. I just imagine like a little like sort of a pre-kindergarten or kindergarten sort of room, and there's a tiny little like corner in which there's a little desk and a little chair, and Scott's sitting there, and it's like he's painting or something. But in today's session of Scott's Style Corner, we're going to talk about handling null and undefined values within UIs. And again, I'm like sort of paraphrasing Scott, who shared the original concept, or like shared some of his maybe pain points of the original concept. So maybe we start there and talk about it.
Oftentimes, what I've seen is when you have a null or undefined field, we treat it as such. We just say in the UI, like, this is null, this is undefined, this is not something. And just as a UX suggestion, if you have let's say, list of filters or something that you can filter by, and you want to have an undefined or null filter be all filters or no filters or something. So you can see all the items in the list. We want to represent that with an actual name. So if this is like statuses, something could be in review, it could be reviewed. And then if it's null or undefined, we were just putting like empty on the page. And a better example would be to say not reviewed. We don't need to save that maybe everywhere as itself as an item, but we want to kind of look at these null or undefined fields. It doesn't always have to be a name that's in an enum and then we assign something to it, but look at null and undefined for the user and how the user might see that. So like when I saw this as an example as like empty, I was like, what does that mean? This looks like a bug. I was very confused. I'm not really the user base, but I was like, oh, okay, well, we just want to say like not reviewed yet. Like we're not in one of these things. Maybe that's not the perfect solution of naming, but let's just always try to present in the UI how the user might need to read that. So to make sure we're not just saying spitting, I guess what I would call it, leaking implementation details onto the UX. We want to avoid that, or the UI rather, so that there is a better UX. So we want to make sure that we're naming things appropriately for how the user might interact with that. And I guess that more so comes with a team that doesn't have a designer. But it's a way of an engineer to think about what they're building. Sometimes we say like, there's a little bit of a rant, but sometimes we say like all this stuff on the front end is easy, but there are so many edge cases and they come up so often. And even if you use somebody's component library, you're not building the component yourself, a lot of these kinds of things pop up, and this is what is the difference. Well, in my example, I'm talking about an internal tool, but this can be the difference in a user understanding what to do and converting for what they're trying to do here. So we just want to make sure that it's clear and concise what you do in all scenarios. And working at startups with Matt, sometimes you're working on stuff that's really complex, and it's hard to make clear what the choice should be or how to push somebody through a flow. So a lot of stuff that we've picked up from working on some difficult experience building.
Yeah, I think to like summarize that point is like it's a little bit contextual, right? It's like where you're showing that in the UI or as part of the experience, like you should, yeah. And again, to reiterate what Scott was saying is like you should clearly communicate to the user like what this means and not try to leave it ambiguous or undefined without not trying to be yeah. I think one thought that came to mind also is like in your example of like status, it's like I would argue maybe it's also a bug to consider status to not have a clearly defined value of like, at least based on the name, it seems like it should be an enum of a number of different things, right? Like reviewed and review, stuff like that. And it's like, maybe you have like a initializing status or something like that. And instead of a null or undefined status. But again, yeah, I think we're starting to dig into semantics, but yeah.
I actually 100% agree with that. I think I should probably preference that this example, is based on a code base that is really large. And that was like the paradigm that had been created before.
All right. Stand-up update. It's been a while since we've done stand-up updates, I feel like. But Dylan, what's up with you?
I don't know, Matt. I didn't think about this.
All right. Popcorn to the next one. Scott, what's up with you?
I didn't really think about it either, but I got this. I got
Nice.
this. We haven't actually recorded for like a couple of months now, right, guys? Is that accurate?
It's. I need to go back through my notes. Yeah, maybe
August.
Yeah.
We recorded like May or June, and then once in July and once in August, and now we're back to our regular cadence, and it is September. It is not September. It's October.
It's the end of October.
It's almost November. Like next week, we'll be able to yeet
The
out.
31st.
I know next Friday, so we'll be
Yeah.
able to do 2 episodes this month. That's amazing. I love it. So all right, so a lot has happened since then. I got married in September. I went on my honeymoon to Iceland in September.
Nice. That's awesome.
I've almost finished the feature I've been talking about since June. I've finished it.
I was doing show notes for I think an episode that's coming out next week or maybe this week. And in it, you're like, oh yeah, I want to wrap up this feature in September. or like early September, and you've still been working on the feature. But yeah.
Oh, continue. Did you have more to say?
No, I was just to say it's like, again, maybe most engineers are, like overly optimistic in how fast we can deliver stuff.
So I don't know if we said this in an episode, but like we found out in the middle of me working on this, like all of August, and maybe I had spent some time in July and whatnot. I had to do a migration of. I talked about it on some podcasts, a migration of Datadog to Grafana, and it became real pressing. So I basically switched gears all of August. I completed what I thought would be enough in September before I went away for my honeymoon. And we ended up doing a dog fooding session with the team and found a whole series of bugs. And I fixed all those bugs. But this feature is so big and it can do so much. Like admittedly, a few things I could have done better was add a whole month. This feature is so big, add a whole month for features that just might not be compatible with this feature. We have an autosave feature that like doesn't work with it. I'm like refactoring that whole thing. So there's all these things that you just didn't anticipate happening. I should have buffered time for that. But I've also like added some UI enhancements to make it look nicer. I put it under a query param. None of this stuff was asked for. I'm like, there's just so many more features I can build within this one feature that I was having a hard time um, finding an endpoint at this point. So today, actually, I'm going to blast out a message to get our pilot users to get people using it. But I'm still actively developing it. There's so many cool features to build on top of it. It's been an amazing experience, and I'm really excited about it. So it's technically like a month late, but I guess for good reason. And I did find out they didn't expect that it could be finished before the end of the year. So it's still done, I guess, 2 months faster than they anticipated. So we're in good spot. All right, that's enough about me. Popcorn Matt.
Let's see. Yeah, at
Were we
work.
doing popcorn?
Yeah,
Were we saying
kind
popcorn?
of. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Well,
popcorn.
we're
Sorry.
starting this episode.
Popcorn.
At work, I've been doing a number of different things, but most recently, I've been trying to dig into a memory leak that we have within RSPack, which is a lot of fun. I'm digging through a lot of it, and I'm realizing that actually Joe, friend of the pod, did a very similar investigation into a memory leak with our Webpack setup, maybe almost a year ago exactly. So that's fun. Unfortunately, we're using his patch version of the library, or his fixed version of the library, so it's not the same leak. Outside of work, I don't know, a number of different things. Let's see. Most recently, I've been listening to this album from Cameron Winters. Let me dig up the album name. Highly recommend it. The album is called Heavy Metal. He's like the lead singer, I think, of Geese, which also has a pretty good album out. Like I'm kind of late to the news on this stuff. This came out like a year ago, but anyway, highly recommend it. Yeah, I've just been jamming to that as of late. I think that's about it. Dylan, have you?
Yeah, I've had time
Have you?
while you guys were doing your updates. Another one big thing for me recently is I've been trying to find consistency in my just like fitness and workouts and stuff. So I've been 2 weeks into this like 6 days a week plan. So it's like Mondays is weights, and then the next day is cardio. So I've been doing that for 2 weeks straight. It's like kind of the best I felt, I don't know, physically, which is pretty cool.
You've been crushing it too. Like we're connected on like the Apple Watch like fitness stuff, and it's like maybe 3 times a day I get a notification saying that Dylan finished a workout, and it's like, God damn, put me to shame. I'm like, I only go for like a 4 mile walk in the morning, and that's it. I need to be doing some more.
Yeah,
I gotta get me a new Apple Watch. Join you guys.
yeah. It's just nice to be able to be like, I'm 36, I'm old, but I feel like better shape than when I was 16 or something. I don't know, maybe not, but close. So humble brag. And then at work, I worked on this pretty big feature where I built a reverse proxy to split traffic between an old site and a completely new Next.js replatform site. It's kind of a solo effort, so it's kind of daunting. We ran into some issues with like the way our experiments were bucketing. It wasn't like a perfect 50-50 split. And we were able to like find a way beyond that. I think some of it was like potentially bounce rate was higher on one, so we weren't hitting like page view events. So we're getting like mixed signals. But one of the greatest parts of this project is when we were like, okay, experiment successful, replatform app is good to go. We can go 100%. All we had to do was flip the DNS to no longer point at the proxy and point directly to the actual like hosted next app. And like I was done. Like all that code doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't get hit anymore. It also like saved 500 milliseconds because I no longer have to like hit that and run experiment checks and feature flag checks. So it was like kind of a sweet feeling at the end of that project to just be like, I get to delete all my code that I spent 2 months on, but now the site's way faster. And we were able to like safely test things, you know. So like along the way, like we had issues on both sides, and we were able to like flip all to one and or flip all back to the other, which was like a really nice experience. So learned a ton on that project. I feel like I could write a little mini book on like how not to create a
Well,
proxy for Next.js. Because there's a lot of like
you should write a blog post at
there's
least.
a lot of like special details you need to like fill in to make sure that request works correctly, because Next does some things and passes specific headers, and if you like don't properly forward those along, like things can go crazy and blow up.
I feel like it's always satisfying to like reach the culmination of a project, where like I feel like we were like at Bleep Fair, Wayfair, we like worked on a number of different things where it's like you kind of get to an end of thing, but then it's like, oh, we got to keep that code around just in case, or like just in case we have to flip back, and I don't know, it was never really had that many satisfying sort of end of project moments.
Yeah, that was like the best feeling. Is like I was basically like, hey guys, once I do this change, it's sort of a no return moment. Like I can still undo it, but it's like a multi-step process. And thankfully we even haven't had to do that, so it's been good.
Nice. Cool. All right. I think we should wrap it up there. As always, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, share it with someone that doesn't currently listen to it, or even share it with them and remind them to listen to it again, just so we boost those stats up. Leave us a review wherever you're listening to this. We appreciate 6 out of 5 star ratings would be great. You can send us tips, just Venmo them to Scott, and he'll worry about distribution. Otherwise, appreciate everyone for listening, tuning in. Hopefully we get back into the groove of releasing an episode weekly, optimistically. I think we should carry forward some momentum and keep releasing these.
At least once per quarter, Matt.
I think we should continue the weekly.
Set the goal low, and then when we exceed it, then we put on a performance review.
I think what we're going to do is try to do weekly, but try to shorten the 30-minute
Recording,
max.
yeah.
I think that works really well for us.
Yeah. We are coming up on, well, we're still a couple months out, but we're fast approaching when we had first originally started to record these, but then we shelved the episodes because they were pretty bad. So we might have to do a year-end performance review episode or something when we get to that point and see how we've.
Do you guys want to do I know that we're supposed to be done here, but do you guys want to do a year-end review where we talk about tech-related things, the best things that happened this year, but also like revisit episodes of the podcast and things we said?
We should do a yearly recap or something.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Catch you guys next week, next quarter, next decade. To be defined.
Next week on Halloween.
Later.
Peace out.
Later.